delighted you're not sitting on the board.
Okay, if we could perhaps take our positions. The bells have tolled, so 6:30's come. Right, so I'd like to welcome everybody to this evening's meeting of Economic Regeneration and Leisure. What a mouthful. There's no planned fire drills, you'll be happy to know, so if the bells do go off, or the fire bells, yeah, the bells toll, Debbie will rapidly go and see what's going on, and if necessary, will point us to the emergency escape, which is over there, isn't it? Yeah. So we will then evacuate quickly. We're going to be broadcast tonight, as always. So I don't know if anybody else has any great desire to broadcast in any method the meeting on the top of the public one. I'm only saying this as always because we all just need to be aware that we will be publicly recorded, but if anyone else wanted to, that's no problem. And, oh yes, if we could all make sure our mobiles are put to silent mode. So they don't go off during the meeting. And without any further ado, we'll move on to agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. I've got apologies for late arrival from Annabelle Blackmore. She said she can't probably get here until about 7 o'clock, so if we could just sort of note that, Debbie. I don't know if there's no other apologies. I can clearly see... Sorry? Oh, sorry, Councillor Webb. I think we got apologies from. I see there's no substituting members here. I assume no one's planning to turn up. No. There's no urgent items on tonight's agenda, and there's nothing urgent to bring forward tonight. Notification of visiting members. Margaret, do you want to come forward?
Good evening. I'd like to reserve the right to speak on 12 and 13 item on the agenda, please.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Actually, another time if you come, if you let me know, and I'll just say it rather than with your hip having to move more than you need to. Okay, number 5, any disclosures by members or officers in relationship to the items on the agenda? I'll just remind everyone, I'm actually, as the chair of the committee, I'm automatically a member or appointed to the Merton Area Arts Partnership, and I attend their sort of AGM on the council's behalf, which was last Thursday, I think, wasn't it? It was last week. And then disclosures of lobbying, has anybody? Oh, sorry, yeah, fine.
Thank you, Chairman. I wouldn't say lobbying, but I suppose it comes under disclosures. I'm a member of the Maidstone Museum's Foundation doings. I'm a member of that. I'm also a strong supporter for Mr. Ken Scott here this evening, and I have donated to his cause for the dementia, so I thought I'd like to make that clear, because I'm bound to speak in support of what he's trying to do.
Okay, thank you. That brings us on to item 6, which is any disclosures of lobbying in respect of our agenda this evening. No one's been lobbied on the committee work programme, for instance. Okay, so number 7, do we think anything here should be taken in private, or we're happy to take it all in public session? Well, I would propose it should all be done publicly. Takes us on to item 8, which is our minutes of our meeting held on the 29th of October. So it starts on page 1 and goes through to 4. So if we can take them for accurateness, if we go page by page, so page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Okay, so everyone happy that I sign those as a correct record? Yeah, okay. I'll just do that now. The next item we've got is presentations of any petitions. Well, I'm not aware of any petitions tonight. And again, item 10 is question and answer sessions for members of the public. I've not been informed of any questions. So that then takes us on to, actually, I think if everybody's happy, should we swap around item 12 and item 11 so that we can go straight to Ken's presentation? Yeah? Okay, we'll do that then. So if we go on to item 12, which is Mr. Scott's presentation to us this evening. I think you know how it all works, so over to you, Ken.
Yes, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to be among friends. Thank you for your welcome. It's worth saying that I come here wearing, or partially wearing, a number of hats. I am chair of Maidstone's Health and Wellbeing Group and therefore a member of the Health and Wellbeing Board. I'm also chair of Maidstone Area Arts Partnership, and I'm a founding director of Kent Arts and Wellbeing. The presentation I shall give this morning will be primarily wearing my Kent Arts and Wellbeing hat, but what I'm presenting is relevant to both the other bodies. I want to talk about the importance of art and creativity, and before I go any further, I'll raise the last point on that slide first, which is that I am not looking for any financial support. You can listen to what I have to say without worrying whether you're going to have to put your hand in your pocket. I'm really here to make you aware of some activity that's going on and hopefully persuade you that it's something that you would want to support in the future. The position is that the case for using creativity to improving well-being is very well established. There are clinical guidelines produced by the National Institute of Clinical Excellence that actually recommend singing, for example, as an effective way of improving well-being and improving the lives of people living with dementia. And there's also evidence that using artistic activity can develop a sense of community and place. And that I think will be relevant very much to the arts and culture strategy that you're shortly going to discuss. What we find, however, is that whilst there's theoretical acceptance, when you actually look at what happens on the ground, the take-up is not as great as you would predict, given the theoretical support for using creativity. And what we find is there's a lot of good things going on, but by and large they're below the radar. And so if you talk to Anne-Marie about trying to find out what's going on in the voluntary arts scene, you know, it was months of work to actually establish that there are something like over 150 organisations in Maidstone. So we believe there's a strong case to have a Kent-wide approach that is comprehensive and well documented so that it actually gets the attention both of the public and of commissioners. So what I'd like to do is then go on and talk a bit more about that. So Debbie, if we could, thank you. Very quickly, Kent Arts and Wellbeing is an organisation that with a colleague I founded 2 years ago. Our target is to try and improve the well-being of individuals and communities through the use of creative activities. Our initial focus has been on older people. Our first major activity is our work of art, and it was voted the best Kent volunteer-led arts activity in Kent at the Kent Messenger Awards, which was sponsored by Maidstone Borough Council. So thank you for your support in that direction. And one of the things that we thought we needed to do was to get everybody in Kent who was interested in promoting wellbeing through creativity together. So we formed the Kent Arts and Wellbeing Network, which is currently supported by about 40 different organisations, and we are trying all the time to increase its reach. And that network is focusing on a strategic program to establish and promote the recognition of creativity and well-being. Next one, please, Debbie. So what we're actually looking for is a program that, first of all, is well promoted. So there's going to be a strong focus on actually making sure that people are aware of what's happening. We want it to cover a range of creative practices so that we can demonstrate that a whole range of different creative practices work. So we will be looking at singing, we will be looking at visual arts, we'll be looking at dance, and we'll probably be looking at one of the literary creative activities. And the intention is to be Kent-wide, and we're proposing having 4 major locations based on integrated care partnership areas. Is everyone familiar with integrated care partnerships? Basically, in Kent, both Kent County Council and all the CCGs have come together and have decided that they will create 4 partnership areas. One is West Kent, one is East Kent, one is Medway and Swale, and the other is North Kent. And we're proposing that we will have activity in each of those 4 areas. I would like Maidstone to be the focus for the activity in West Kent, where we want to focus on local communities. We particularly want to focus on local communities where there is evidence of deprivation. And Maidstone is one of the areas in West Kent that has the highest level of what's called super lower output areas that evidence poor levels or high levels of social deprivation. We also want to focus on communities of interest. One of those we will focus on is people living with dementia, but also we could pick up on homeless people as well as an example, and I will develop that later on. And the approach we want to adopt is an intergenerational approach. So although we are focusing on the well-being of people over the age of 50, we want to engage younger people in the process of improving that well-being. And there's going to be a strong focus on using volunteers. And we're interested in using volunteers because we believe there's what I would describe as a quadruple whammy. The volunteers benefit enormously. The service users benefit because they get a high level of personal attention. The project benefits because we are able to do a lot more for less. And the community benefits because if we develop the volunteers properly, then they will want to continue working and provide support in the community. And we want to create a legacy of a band of volunteers that are able to work in the community and take and lead initiatives by themselves. This strategic program is going to cost somewhere between £500,000 and 600,000, and my expectation is we'll be spending about 100,000 in each of the 4 areas. And then we'll be spending some other money in terms of coordination of the whole patch. I would like it to be Maidstone. First of all, Maidstone is recognised not only as the most typical area in Kent, but it's the closest to a typical town in the country. At least that's what the National Statistics Group have said. It's obviously the largest area in West Kent, has high areas of relative deprivation. It's got a substantial arts activity, so we have a good base on which to secure volunteers. We know there are big gaps in provision. If you look, for example, at Bearstead, where I live, it is very well blessed with a range of arts and cultural activities. Go half a mile down the road towards Parkwood, Seneca, and they've got, I would estimate, less than 10% of the activities that are enjoyed by Bearsted. So we see some big gaps, which is why we're interested in focusing on areas of high relative deprivation. There's a supportive voluntary sector with Involve and Age UK, and I believe that there is going to be a supportive borough council. And the purpose really today is to hope that you will turn around and say, yes, this is a good thing that actually moves in the right direction. An example of what we might do is a programme that we are considering for singing for people who are homeless or who have chaotic lifestyles. It's obviously very relevant to Maidstone. It's also relevant to Canterbury and a number of other large towns in Kent. There's a model that I would like to copy. It's called the Choir with No Name. It's a model that's been very successful in London, Manchester, Birmingham, and one or two other areas. It's not a standard choir. First of all, the idea is that this is a choir that meets every week. Very often you'll find that choirs meet according to academic term times. That we think would not be a useful way of actually managing things, because we want to provide an activity that is ongoing throughout the year and doesn't leave people in the lurch for 6 or 7 weeks every now and again. We don't want it simply to be a singing group. Very much this approach is about getting the message across to homeless people and people with chaotic lifestyles that they are of value, and that not only are other people wanting to do something to help them, but it makes sense for them to do something to help themselves. And so one of the things that the Choir with No Name does is that after the rehearsal, a cafe is created and a freshly cooked hot meal is provided, and only the people who attend the rehearsal may participate. And you need a bouncer to actually stop the others from getting in. The other thing is that the intention is that this choir will perform, because that is a very clear statement of the value of their activity. And not only that, it actually raises money to enable them to continue. But to make that happen, you need an appropriate venue, and I've identified one in Maidstone that is appropriate. You need a music director and probably a deputy music director who can be available throughout the year. And you also need a project manager, because if we're going to try to ensure that people come regularly, there will be some personal follow-up to encourage them to attend. If we're going to have concerts, then initially there will be somebody needed to actually promote that. Now, this is not an easy project to move forward on. It's much more expensive than a normal choir. But I know that there is support for doing that by those charities working with homeless people. And so this is just an example of the sort of thing that we could develop that would be using a creative approach to improve well-being, and it is related to the needs of the locality. At that point, Debbie, if we could move on, please. So I hope that what you've seen, you can see that that could integrate well with the new arts and culture strategy. We're not looking for funding, but of course if you have any, that would be appreciated. But what I am looking for is a commitment to support us in our funding applications. I'm looking for a willingness to get involved in helping us to select areas of activity that would meet the needs of Maidstone. And to support those areas of activity on a non-financial basis. So my ask today is, I've told you what our plans are, and I'm just looking at the moment for you to say, well, that sounds like a decent thing to try and do. When your plans are more fully developed, come back and we'll be happy to perhaps support and discuss them further. Okay.
All right, thank you very much for that, Ken. That was really interesting and quite a innovative approach. I think especially the idea of the choir as as an example of what you're trying to achieve. And obviously, Debbie, if anyone wants to ask questions, they can, can't they? Yeah, I was just going to say, if anyone would like to ask Ken any questions, but what I was, before I do, what I was thinking was perhaps, I know we're going to come on the work programme in a minute, it would strike me as, picking up your last point, looking for, council to give sort of moral and any support it might do, but also obviously, to make a statement of that, then we need something probably to our January committee, just a short report, picking up, Ken's presentation, obviously that gives you, people worked up a bit further, just so the council can then, or the committee then can, I would assume make some, formal sort of decisions in terms of support it might be able to provide in kind or, and so on. So that's how I think, the practical way we can do it, because we can't make any decisions tonight. I've been told by Debbie over the last week about that. Yes, anybody want to ask any questions at all? Phelan Martin.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ken. I found that really heartwarming, actually, and it certainly touched my soul. I do have a query, and please pardon my ignorance. Homelessness in Maidstone, I think it was only on the news this morning, where we used to have, 50-odd rough sleepers about 6 months ago, a year ago, and now we're down to single figures. So is there a correlation between the rough sleepers and the homelessness? And I ask that out of sheer ignorance, and I should know the answer, because I'm thinking that if you do succeed in getting a choir together, we're going to be a bit short of rough sleepers to go. So, which is a good thing, but I'm trying to help you, so please help me understand.
The answer I would give is that this is not just for homeless people. This is for homeless people and people with chaotic lifestyles. And those individuals who might be rough sleeping, for whom some sort of accommodation is found, may still not have stable life relationships. So they could still benefit from this sort of activity.
Thank you. If I can come back on that, I think I would be the first person to say that music lifts the soul for whatever your circumstances are, whether it's mental health, bereavement, it doesn't matter what it is. Music lifts the soul, whether you're listening to it, playing it, singing it. So just for those reasons alone, I congratulate you, Ken. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Ken, absolutely. You've ticked several boxes. I was writing down before you started speaking about how it affects mental health and dementia, both doing art, getting involved in the arts, and indeed you then spoke about singing, playing musical instruments. I think what you're proposing here, it seems very feasible. You said £100,000. I then saw at the end of the line, it said over 4 years. Yeah, so you've got something. You also said a venue that you have in mind. Could you allude to your have in mind?
The two things are separate. So we've arrived at our costing looking at how much our work of art, which is a project that we've run, has cost. And on that basis, we believe that to run a series of activities around Maidstone would cost roughly £25,000 a year. Okay, so that's the 100,000 over 4 years. The project, the the homeless choir would probably, would not be a cheap option, because if you've got 2 music directors, you've got the hire every week, you've got a program manager, that's very much at the top end of any activity we looked at. So if we did that, it would up the cost beyond 25,000. So that's, I just make that general point. In terms of a location, we've been trying to look at somewhere which would be acceptable to the clients who would not necessarily find that it had a, I don't know, was badged as not the place they would want to go, but has a rehearsal space, a kitchen, and a room for a cafe, and is not booked every week, every night of the week. And I have at the moment managed to forget the precise name of the location, but it is a church in Borough Street, more or less opposite the Baptist rehearsal space, and I can't remember the name of it at the moment. But that is a location that has its own restaurant space, because it used to have a cafe. It's got its own kitchen, and it's got a very good rehearsal area, and it is very well equipped with musical instruments recording everything. It's superb. So, and that is available on a number of nights of the week, because they don't have a policy of letting it out. So, and they're willing for it to be used for that purpose.
If I can come back on that, Paul, I wonder whether there's any future in looking at the possibility of contributions from development within the town or within the borough, because if you're setting up, in a sense, you're a bit like a library. People could use what you're intending to put on and the facilities that you would have there. So it may be, if you formed a body that could have contributions made to it, then that may be a possibility, because we have health and well-being within our strategic plan, and to enable healthy communities. I do pick up on Faye's point about homelessness, but I'm glad that you came back and said this is not about homelessness per se, because we have managed to house a number of people, of clients, and they, I think, need other things as well to do in their life. We also have, I think there's a project coming forward where we're going to be recycling things and having a work environment for them to be in as well. So I think this would round it all together. It certainly gives us something to think about, and if it's put onto the work programme, or we can look as to where there are elements we can support you morally, and if there are any times when members can possibly give any of their money that they might have at the time in a non-divulged budget, then that's another way of possibility of raising money. But I think there are possibly companies out there within Maidstone who would see this as a very good idea.
Thank you very much. Can I say that I mentioned Kent Arts and Wellbeing? It's currently a company limited by guarantee, not for profit. So that could well be the vehicle through which that's achieved. And it will, at the moment, we are looking at trying to create a special purpose vehicle to run the programme I talked about, as a way of bringing together a number of different Age UK organisations and others throughout Kent, so that we have a partnership group on board that would be supporting that. And that would be, I think, a very good vehicle for seeing those funds.
Okay, Bob.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very interesting. Thank you for coming to do this presentation. I'd like to pick up on this point that you made about people with chaotic lifestyles. Firstly, how could you see us as councillors or as a council identifying potentially people who have got chaotic lifestyles, whether this would be on a member basis or whether utilising a or several departments within the council? Immediate thought crops to mind of whether the housing department, for instance, could identify. So it's basically, how would you find these people with chaotic lifestyles?
Right. My assumption is that they are already somewhere, largely in the system, and that for this to move forward, we would need to be working with a number of voluntary organisations in Maidstone, as well as you have a coordinating officer in Maidstone who actually deals with the whole range of voluntary associations linked to homelessness. And I've already spoken to him, and he would be prepared to lend his support. So my expectation is that we would find people for the singing group through organisations that exist already and are trying to provide support for people who are homeless and have chaotic lifestyles.
I'll just ask a question, but then I'll take Dana. One thing that obviously you said at the beginning, that the project's going to cost circa $5,600,000 over the 4 years. I just wondered if you'd actually identified funding to help towards that figure at the current time.
Our intention is that we will initially go to reaching communities. We are already in contact with them and talking with them, and we will probably approach them initially for 150,000, and then we can go back to them in the future. And we've also identified grant-making bodies like the Esme Fairburn Foundation, and there are about 4 others that we have identified, but we want to first of all work with reaching communities because they have already worked with us on our work of art, so they know us, and they have so far been helpful, and my expectation is that we will have the first formal meeting with them probably in February, with a view to making a formal bid during the spring. So we're looking at a progressive approach rolling forward over the 3 to 4 years.
That's fine, thank you. Diana.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, thank you, Ken. It was a lovely to hear what good work you're doing, so thank you very much, and also for the future. How can people find you as a voluntary arts place? Do you have a website or anything so people can come and find you? Thank you.
If you're looking at Maidstone Area Arts Partnership, then yes, we have a website, just. It's just been reset up, and it's maidstonearts.org. And if you go on there, then you can begin. We're beginning to populate the website, so it's a bit skeletal at the moment, but it's beginning to be populated. And if you or anyone wants to know more, then I'm very keen. I come along and talk with you and give information. I'm just want to move this sort of thing forward.
Thank you very much. It's great what you do, and I hope you get everything that you need. Thank you.
I would say if you're interested in finding more about our work of art, which is the project that won the award, then if you go on, the website is kentartsandwellbeing.org.uk, then that has all of the information on there, and there's a lot more on there as well.
Okay, well, look, on behalf, obviously, of the committee, we've all found that really interesting and stimulating. And as I say, we'll you can have a sort of a full discussion of it at our next meeting, which will be in January. Sorry, Margaret. Did you?
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to speak in support of the homeless choir, because I believe I am very much qualified to speak about being homeless, because I have been homeless. You mentioned how people are homeless. Bed and breakfast for 6 months was not a home. I had to leave at 9 o'clock in the morning and was not allowed to go back into that accommodation until something like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At that time, I had a son of 10 years old, and it happened during the school holidays. If I hadn't had a car, we'd have had nowhere to go at all, and I consider that to be absolutely homeless. Another idea in thinking about people who are homeless are people that are staying with relatives, who are staying with friends. Possibly the relatives and the friends don't actually want those people there, but can't have the idea of people actually sleeping in the streets. As I say, I was homeless. Thank God I wasn't sleeping in the streets, but having to be in bed and breakfast for that length of time caused me to have a feeling of being invisible. I felt invisible. I felt that when I went out into the town, I could see people, but I felt they couldn't see me. I became almost like a non-person. And I believe that with this homeless choir, this choir of no name, there will be drawn together people who have those kind of feelings of not existing in a sense. It is a desperate situation, and I think it's already been mentioned that when we sing, when we're happy, we sing. Some people might say, oh, shut up that noise, you know, whatever. But happiness does raise our spirits. Singing does raise our spirits, whoever and whatever we're doing. Gathering together with people like-minded in the same kind of situation does, I think, have a way of making you feel that you are not alone in a situation, whatever situation that may be. If you are talking to someone, I know when we go abroad, you know, if you're with a whole load of people that you don't know the language, you meet someone who speaks English, that's wonderful, you know. And that you know, and just being able to relate to people and feel that you're not invisible, you are there, you are a person. I think creating something out of, people have so many talents and so many wonderful things they can do, but they need the opportunity, as Ken is offering and talking about, to be able to do that, and also confidence. We know when we have our children growing up, whatever they do, whatever association or organisation they belong to, it brings confidence to them. It will help people who are concerned to be called homeless, but not necessarily sleeping on the street. They can be tucked away in all kinds of crevices and things like that, but they are still homeless, because a home is somewhere you can go, somewhere you are, someone where you can invite your friends, somewhere where you can shut the door, have a cup of tea and feel you're at home. And a lot of people don't have that. Even if you can't see them sleeping on the street, they're still there. So I absolutely, passionately support this choir with no name, and I hope that I will be able to take part in some. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, for that moving statement of your experience, and you know, an example of probably how these projects will actually help people. I think, as I say, we will be taking a report in January, looking at you know, these proposals, perhaps also perhaps looking at research in terms of how you know, arts and culture helps people, is, you know, obviously with dementia, but you know, other sort of disadvantaged groups and so on, because I think there's a massive role there. And if we can work with yourselves, you know, to do stuff in sort of Maidstone based and so on. You know, it can only be for the good of, you know, of our society in Maidstone, can't it? So I think it's a really great idea, and I look forward to us having a, you know, a sort of discussion, and obviously perhaps you'll be, you know, you'll be welcome to obviously attend our January meeting. Okay, so thank you for that. If we can go back now to agenda item number... Annabelle, I gave you apologies for being late earlier. So, if we go back to agenda item 11, which is the committee work programme on page 5. I'm going to suggest that given that the December committee at the moment, in terms of the work programme's only got the one item, which would be the presentation by Cohesion Plus relating to the MELA. But what we do in December is probably not hold a formal committee meeting because, you know, in a sense, the bureaucracy associated with a meeting is quite considerable. But make use of the date on the 17th to obviously invite Cohesion Plus to come to brief us, which is what we asked, you know, is they can sort of come to talk to us about their business plan, and then obviously in January, which would be the next opportunity, the committee could consider what might come out of the Cohesion Plus presentation. But also there's a number of items we were looking at to have briefings on by John and the officers, which we could make use of that date. John, do you want to go through the items we were talking about?
Oops. Certainly, yes. We just thought there's been, in terms of economic development, there's been a lot of legacy decisions this year carried over from Policy and Resources Committee, not requiring a decision, but that doesn't necessarily mean the projects aren't ongoing. And I thought it might be useful just to bring everybody up to speed with regard to some of those projects, notably the Moat Park Cafe new build project and State Services Building, the refurbishment of the bus station project, and also very briefly the Opportunity Sites work that has recently been approved with amendments from our Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee. So that was the plan, to give 3 short presentations to the committee as briefings on that particular date.
Yeah, that seems to, I mean, it's Faye.
I think that would be really useful, actually, and thank you for the suggestion, because for those of us who have been on P&R over the past year or whatever, these things sort of ring bells, but I think it's quite right and proper and appropriate that they're brought to this very committee, because that's one of the reasons that we were put together for, to give our economy a proper standing and proper recognition. So I think a briefing on the current projects would be excellent, highly appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. So on the 17th of December, rather than having a formal committee meeting, we'll have a members' briefing. Yeah. And we'll discuss those. We'll discuss the MELA. And I was wondering, Victoria, whether it might be worth just updating people. Obviously, our application's now gone in for the Heritage Lottery, the Heritage Lottery Fund with the museum, just so you could sort of let people know where we've got to on that. It's just, I think it seems to make more sense. And then afterwards, we could go for a seasonal drink in one of the 2 pubs on either side of the town hall. So if everyone's happy with that, that's what we're doing in December. Martin.
I would be very happy if I hear that the chairman will be providing cake, as it is a most festive time of year. And if we have to come along to listen, and it's not a committee meeting, I think that's only proper. And thank you, I'm sure we'll all agree. Thank you.
Yeah, I've not baked mince pies for quite a while, but I can always have a go, I'm sure. And anyway, John, any other points you want to raise in terms of these sort of outline thing at the moment? Okay, well, I mean, one thing I think we should be proud of as a committee, in a sense, we have discussed over the last few months most of our priority areas we set out in June. So if you remember, we talked about the arts, we talked about the museums, sport, and economic regeneration, and all those things are definitely, you know, moving forward. So can we agree to note that report? Yeah. In which? Sorry.
As amended.
Sorry. Note the report as amended. Thank you, Debbie. Look, we're not holding a meeting in December. And that then takes us on to agenda item 13, which is our arts and culture strategy, which starts on page 6 through to page 51. So, Anne-Marie, I think you've got your presentation already on the screen. So, over to you.
Thank you. A few years ago, the former Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee agreed to support further work on culture and heritage across the borough. The heritage has largely been addressed with the museum's new transformation plan, but arts and culture have not really been equally considered. So this year, we've sought to change that. We've carried out extensive research into what's happening locally, including a full SWOT analysis, an audit of all existing arts and cultural organisations in the borough, and lots of conversations with local artists, arts organisations, and collectives. Combining this with the results of previous research and looking at the wider regional and national context, we've developed a new arts and culture strategy. This will help us to establish our aims and priorities for arts and culture in Maidstone and ensure we can capitalise on all the benefits that they can bring to our society, our economy, and the health and well-being of our residents, as we've heard so eloquently tonight from Ken. The council used to have a dedicated arts department many moons ago, but we now have a chance to reinvigorate the sector, building on the existing infrastructure and working closely with partners across the sector to make Maidstone a truly vibrant and sustainable arts and cultural hub. That's why we're recommending that the Arts and Culture Strategy and Action Plan be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other officers wish to add any further comments before I open it up? Okay, just before we go to questions, I'd just like to, thank Anne-Marie for the work she's done over the last year. I think we had wanted to look at this earlier, but I think the extra couple of months we've allowed has given us a much better report, and I think a good action plan to take us forward for, you say sort of a couple of years, but there's a lot of work there, and hopefully, one of the things I would like to do is, assuming the committee agrees the proposal tonight, is to subsequently, as I've mentioned to John and Anne-Marie, is for us to arrange to invite the Arts Council officers who are appropriate for this area and for Maidstone to have a discussion, so we can have a discussion with them, because now we have assuming in about the next hour we have an arts policy in place, that will provide the start for a conversation in terms of potentially looking for their assistance in terms of being able to apply for project funding. Because obviously, the catch-all to this to some extent is clear, as we say in the report. Anne-Marie's contract or secondment's been extended for a further year, but clearly we now need to go out to other public sector funders and so on to see if we can get some additional resources to help augment the work we wish to do. So I was just going to say to Margaret, did you as a visiting member wish to say something?
Yes, I am the Maidstone Borough representative to Maidstone Arts, Area Arts Partnership. And just to say that we had a very good AGM last week, very interesting, with a presentation from Anne-Marie. Also to very much thank Councillor Harper for encouraging me to be the representative of something which is absolutely just so innovative and exciting. Check out the website. There are several other websites which are related to Maidstone Arts, but just to make sure that you look at maidstonearts.org. As Ken said, it will be populated by other events, and other streams of art, which I think is going to be very interesting. A point that was put to me is that what we tend to think about is encouraging people to go to what might be called a loneliness group. People don't want to say that they're lonely. Somehow it makes it feel as if it's their fault. But when people are encouraged to take part in art, whether it's music, drama, drawing, painting, whatever is their talent, because everybody does have a talent, then they go along to that. They don't have to wear a badge saying, I am lonely and I'm here. Maybe that might encourage them to go there. Maybe that might be what forces them or pushes them or drives them to go there. But they won't be lonely when they're there, because there'll be other people, other like-minded people, other people sharing that talent. And that fits so much with Maidstone Borough and the wellness and the way we feel very strongly about helping people and supporting them in those kind of things. I want to commend Ken for his work at Maidstone Area Arts Partnership. Also, during the AGM, I know Councillor Harper was very supportive in taking forward several points that were made in helping to support, giving information to the people that were there, and I know that he'll go on doing that. And I will definitely be very pleased to take part in that whole situation, which I think is really exciting. It draws in so many people. And as I say, I think it will make a big difference to people, to their lives, to feeling that they are part of a cohesive society rather than being on their own, or and having an opportunity to show their talents and make friends with people. So much can come out of art, whatever diverse way that is. Drawing, writing, I write poetry and things like that, so but I won't bore anyone with that. But I think that's a really good thing, and I just really support it, and I'm extremely pleased to have been encouraged to be a representative of Maidstone Area Arts Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. I was going to say, if you stay where you want, because you want to speak to the next item rather than having to move back and forth, you might as well sit where you are now, just to save yourself. So yes, questions or points from any member? Martin, Diana, and Bob.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for a very thorough report, obviously. I know you've had more time to just sort of cross the T's and dot the I's, but when I looked at Appendix 1, the SWOT analysis, and I went through them in turn, I think there may be just a couple of bits that we should be having in our strengths that maybe are not here, unless I've missed them somewhere else. Well, I actually did see them later on, but I think these are strengths. Cobtree Manor Park is not on our list of attractions. It's on one of our opportunities. Whereas if you look at the figures for Cobtree Manor Park, they are growing and keep on growing. So I do think that should be added in under Kent Live, Kent Showground, Moat Park, Cobtree Manor Park. I don't know if this is necessarily the right place to say it, but we've said about the business terrace, growing number and creative business. We should also have in there that we are aiming for the Maidstone, the capital of Kent, the business capital of Kent. I think that should really be on there as well. I know this is, well, I know where I am, but I do think we should mention it. This is something for Ken to sort of prick an ear up to here. We say weaknesses, and we say there's no central database to access information on arts and cultural groups. It sounds like there should be a Kent-wide list of cultural arts groups, and indeed what they're doing. If they had a diary, then people would be able to look at where they're going. Could they take in a bit of art where they're going or some culture and inform that, almost linked to tourism. We mentioned in our opportunities one Maidstone as a partnered project. I think that is very good to do that. Are we coupling that with the bid as the same thing? I don't know if we need to mention it separately. Under the threats, it says Medway Council's bid to become UK City of Culture for 2025. I think that should move to opportunity. Excellent. Oh, we've double whammy, have we? Well, I don't really think it's a threat. We were at a Kent leaders meeting, and actually it was the Gateway, Thames Gateway, and they announced that that's what they were doing, and we have indeed said once we see what the whole project is, we will obviously, as a neighbouring borough, be giving a letter of support to their bid. So I'm sure, yes, I can see it now on the left-hand side. You've copied and pasted beautifully. So a threat and an opportunity. Brilliant. I will, on that point, I'll refrain from talking anymore. But overall, a very thorough report, and thank you very much.
Actually, wonderful. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. I was going to say, the point you mentioned about the database, obviously, the Maidstone Area Arts Partnership, as we were at their launch of that, are now starting to partially address that in terms of their membership, and it might well be there's an opportunity for Anne-Marie to work with them to help populate that further.
One of the projects I've actually been working on this year is to develop a database, and it's now live on the Maidstone Borough Council website. There is an Arts and Culture tab if you scroll right to the bottom of the homepage, and I've already got, I think it's about 60 local arts and cultural organisations signed up. And what that allows them is, it's divided by categories, so music, heritage, arts and crafts. It's a really simple listing, just a brief description of what they do, but it tells people where they meet, when they meet, any fees that they might have to pay for going along, who to contact and how to get in touch. So there's an email and a web address on there as well. It's not an events calendar in terms of what they're putting on, like Maidstone Area Arts Partnership, but it is now a directory for arts and culture in the borough.
Can I ask an additional question? How are we going to Google and saying that we promote this if someone puts in what can I do in Maidstone, what can I do in Eccles, wherever? Are we able to promote that through Google, or are we just letting it rise to the surface like good roughage?
I think that's something for IT to be looking at and pushing. We have done some promotion on it in terms of press releases. There was an article on Heart FM as well, but I obviously need to talk to IT about Google rankings.
Diana.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. It's great to see some good things hopefully happening in Maidstone, so thank you for that. I was a little bit disturbed to see, I think it was on map 3, where we was talking about low life expectancy in the certain areas of the borough. I think, I don't know what page it's on, sorry.
I'm looking for map 3.
Ah, it's, thank you, 26, thank you. I know that the list isn't extensive with regards to what arts and culture is, because it can include many different things, of course. I'm just wondering how we can engage with residents in these type of areas as a matter of priority, how to ask them what it is that they want, and well, I'm upset by that remark, actually. I'm upset by this, that people have a low expectancy, and I just don't think it's right. But and also maybe we could think out of the box a little bit with what we can offer with arts and so on. I mean, I haven't got the answer, but maybe a little bit off the wall with what we can offer. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the action points in the action plan is to actually do a wider public consultation to try and understand some of the barriers to participation. And I'm very keen that if we're putting on events and activities, we ask the people what they would want to do, rather than going to them and saying, we think this would be a really good idea for you. So it's co-created with the local community, very much involving them right from the start as to what the project should be and what would benefit them the most. So that will mean going out working with other partners, other departments across the council, housing services, social support, to try and reach those particular communities. But there will be a wider public consultation as part of the plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not actually here to plug the museum this evening, but as Anne-Marie's line manager, I'd just like to say as well that what we're proposing here fits in very well with the application that's gone to the Lottery Fund. One of our core audiences of people that we are looking to engage with the museum project, and therefore with activities, are people, are families on low income. And we will be working with agencies already working in those areas, again, to talk to people about what they want. And some of those will be heritage-based, some of them will be arts-based, and we'll be working sort of cross-team on it.
No, thank you.
I'm going to say this also adds into the work which Ken was describing earlier about well-being, doesn't it? Which we're looking at again in January. So I've got Faye. I've got Bob, Faye, and then Annabelle.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously, an extensive amount of work has gone on here, but I have one huge disappointment. To the north of Maidstone is a strip of land called an AOMB. The borough stretches to the other side of the AOMB, but I find no reference here at all to the settlements north of the AOMB. You've got Walderslade, Lordswood, Bredhurst. There's nothing on here at all concerning those areas, and yet I know for a fact that lots of art and craft and things like dance go on there. I think someone has forgotten that there is life the other side of the AOMB.
It's one of the issues I had when I was doing the audit, is actually identifying those organisations and areas where events are happening. It's actually very difficult to find that information, and I appreciate that more work needs to be done in those areas to identify all of the different groups that we have actively operating in the borough.
Bob, do you think the Boxley Parish might be able to help with that? Because that's, you know, I'm just thinking if you could
Boxley Parish can help,
yeah.
Certainly, and Bredhurst also. I know in Bredhurst they're very active with lots of different things that go on in the village hall throughout the week. And in Boxley we have virtually a full programme, daytime and evenings.
Perhaps if you could, obviously as the ward councillor and a parish councillor, if you could put those councils in contact with Anne-Marie, then she can obviously update stuff to reflect that. But that's a very good point. Sorry, Jill, I think something. Annabelle, I'll take Annabelle and then I'll take you. Sorry, yeah. Right, sorry, yeah. Thank you for correcting me. It should be Faye, Annabelle, and Jill.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I have to say, I found this arts and culture strategy a darn good strategy. I read it and I thought, this is what we should be doing. This is what we needed. This begins to fill the gap. I hope it's a beginning. Obviously, it's not the be-all and end-all, as my colleague here has just said, Councillor Hinder. There will be gaps, of course, but I have to say it's a very good strategy. And as I read through it, I did a lot of highlighting, but a couple of things really struck me was how I was able to relate to it locally. For example, I think, I've lost it now, you were talking on page 17 talking about our society, encourage intergenerational and intercultural learning, blah, blah, blah. I have to say, in Barming, we have St Margaret's Brass Band. We have older people and younger people, and in fact, people of all ages play in that small brass band, and they play at our remembrance service, and it brings tears to our eyes in the most respectful way. I don't mean because it's painful to listen to it, I mean because it is so moving as a community event. So there are parts of this that touched me. Also, a person next door, near to me, is learning the trombone, and I've heard that trombone from a couple of noises generate and grow into, I've recognised a carol that we're going to be singing at the local carol service. So there is stuff in here that I really touched me. Health and well-being. Again, I was impressed and encouraged by the fact that health and well-being, you've touched on it in quite a few areas, social prescribing, and how true that is. You look at the Blackthorn Trust, they've got their garden, they run arts, ceramics, and the help that that brings to people with mental health issues, perhaps they've had a stroke, whatever it is, the value of art in its widest sense is incredible. And that is something that clinical, getting a pill from a doctor, won't cure. You just need that connectivity. Talking of connectivity, the other thing I liked about this document, the strategy, was the overall connectivity, the national context, the regional context, the local context. So this really hit the spot. If I can just move on to the action plan. Was it on page 44, I think? I've lost it about 3 times. Yeah, a lot of this, you've got officer time, officer time, officer time. My concern is, do we have the resources? I know we say, oh, we haven't got any money, we can't fund. We do have staff, but the staff have limited time. And I do get concerned about pressure of the work that we got very high expectations from our staff. We expect them to work miracles, let's face it. But you're human beings at the end of the day. So I would like some reassurance that there is the ability to actually resource this action plan. You mentioned, sorry to go on, Chairman, but I really got into this quite heavily. This online directory, actually I think it's something that Ken brought up. There's a huge value in having something that connects Kent-wide, because I know that I've got a colleague in Staplehurst who doesn't come to Maidstone, but they certainly go to Tenterton, but there's still a Maidstone person. So I think the connectivity around Maidstone and into the wider Kent is quite important. Any database must be kept up to date and properly managed, because if it isn't, it can destroy its worth overnight. And I think the final word, so I'm finally getting to the end, apologies Annabelle, Councillor Battle. Page 44, new exhibition gallery space in the town centre. First place I thought of was County Hall. They make very good use of their exhibition space there. We've got a hunky great space, haven't we? At the foot of Maidstone House stairs. Yes, as you come in, Maidstone had up the link, Maidstone link. Thank you, Councillor Cox. Huge space. We could hang pictures, we could have some music, we could do all sorts of things there. I'm sorry to go on, but I think this is our first, this has really been given some emphasis, and I'm really pleased to see it. Thank you very much.
Coming back to your point on resourcing, because I think that's a very important point. I'll be working with John and obviously Victoria and Anne-Marie to make sure that in terms of as we're pushing this action plan through, that we're not over, I don't want to put unreasonable stress on any member of staff or members of staff. Clearly, you know, Officer Ty, we've got Anne-Marie, but there's also other people around the council will be, you know, be working on some of these projects, and a lot of them. I mean, I'm looking at one on page 44, 2.3, the top one there, for instance. So what we're looking at there, this is about the amphitheatre down by the parish church, is working with the River Group, which has already got established as a charity. And so a number of these things will be sort of coordinated with other organisations. Actually, one below that is working with Kent Cohesion Plus. So that through partnerships, hopefully we can bring in other people to help actually do the stuff. So we're not necessarily, I'm glad you're nodding your head, we're not necessarily expecting Anne-Marie to go out and do every single item here over the next 2 years, because we'd need to clone her a couple of times over, I suspect, to actually get that done. But that's where I was thinking about now. Once if we agree this, then we can talk to people like the Arts Council and other partners. And I know the various councils individually have gone off to developers in the past. Obviously, we've got the problems in the park and we had the Riverside Festival. But once, it might well be there's a strategic approach to looking at some of those types of partnerships, and they might be ways of getting, you know, additional support to help us. Now we've agreed, if you like, a cohesive action plan for the next couple of years. So, you know, I'm hopeful that, you know, we bring in extra money. I'm not looking at one person to do all of this, because it's just not physically going to be possible for one person to completely reinvent and assist the Maidstone Area Arts Partnership to sort of bring a renaissance of arts all on themselves. I mean, yeah. So, Annabelle, next.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there were some quite interesting parts to this where we had these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, although I got a bit confused when one thing was a strength, but it was also a weakness, or it was an opportunity, but it's also a threat. But maybe that's just my understanding. Personally, I think the fact that Medway Council is going to be the UK City of Culture, I think we should be jumping on that and piggybacking that, there's no doubt, because I'm sure we've got quite a lot to add. The one thing I would say about this is it's very town-centric. There doesn't seem to be an awful lot in here that says rural. Now, what I would like to say to you is, and we've talked about groups over the borough, if you, and this is just an observation, take it or leave it, but all the parish councils, or most of them, produce not a newsletter, what do you call it? The thing they have, a parish magazine every month. And in the parish magazine, the different people who operate groups, they have little advertisements of what they do. So it might be an idea to write to every parish council and say, can I have a copy of your parish magazine? Because you'll probably find there's all sorts of other groups in there which you haven't included here, which would make it less town-centric. The other thing is that they've got halls, which could be used for your kind of messy workshops. So you could almost have a theme, have it in the town, have something in the suburban area, urban area, something in the rural area. And you could almost create something for the different seasons. I'm not very arty, but this is as far as my brain goes. This is arts and culture. What's gardening? Because some people would say that could be artistic. So should we be including gardening type projects or the allotments? I don't know, it's just a thought. I'm just asking the questions because I don't know the answers. And another thing that I wondered about was the third sector, you know, the charity sector. They're doing things. Are we actually dovetailing with them, or are we, you know, acting in silos? We've mentioned KCC, but there's not much about the charity sector. So I wondered if we should all be operating together, and that way you get a bit more bang for your buck, really. And if you were after a bit of extra cash, why not tap up some of the businesses, either in centre of town or even in the rural areas? Because even if they'll only supply you with a couple of £100, but it means they get a little badge on something, why not do it? So just a couple of suggestions, really.
Hello. Once again, just to say that one of the target groups for the Museums Transformation Project, which, as I said earlier, really includes both heritage and arts, is residents in the rural parts of the borough. So we are looking to do activities out there.
Sorry, Chair, I just had another really weird thought. Did anyone see it in the paper a few weeks ago? I think it was Rochester Cathedral had a mini golf course. Did you see that? Slightly wacky. I don't know whether there's any church around who might be prepared to have an art exhibition, for example, within their church. I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't ask, you don't get. But if you think about a lot of the churches, they have messy church, don't they, for their junior festivals. Exactly. So again, is that another area that hasn't been covered by the arts and culture strategy? Again, just a thought of another little branch.
And Jill, you're next.
Well, mine's just a follow on from we were saying about the rural area seems to have been sort of missed. I know in Leeds we have about 5 clubs, anything from garden societies to amateur dramatics, etc. And they can be found on the village website. It has a clubs tab.
I mean, there was definitely no intention when we were doing the audit to sort of make it, you know, sort of town-centred. I think part of, I can remember talking with Anne-Marie when she was doing this, it was actually, because there was no sort of centralised database to go to, it was actually them finding out actually what there was. And I know, because you did your presentation at the Maidstone Area Arts Partnership, you said, look, as you're finding more and more groups all the time to add on to the databases. So definitely, as I said earlier, any links anyone's aware of, you know, we've got things like the parishes now, so that we can add on. We want to do this because, you know, this is the start. It's a long time really since the council's been active in this whole area, and you know, in a way where it's almost not, you know, because clearly there's a lot of existing activity, but for the borough's point of view, we're sort of starting from scratch, because all the old records, the old departments have all vanished, and so yeah, as much input anybody here or, you know, is aware of to give us, then we can actually make this better, because we really want to make everyone's lives better, as we said in our vision, and I think we can do it with this. Martin, you wanted to quickly come.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There was an item here on page 69 about noise from music events. I understand the last couple of things. Is it? Well, put me down for that. Put me down first on that one, and I'll switch.
You know me, I'll most likely forget it when we get there, but don't worry. Okay. As soon as we get to that next item, after we've had the introduction, I'll call you. What page number are you on? That's 42 is this one.
Excellent. The action plan looks very thorough, and I hope we'll be able to see that as it reports back as things get changed, amended or updated. So it's a very good working document.
Okay, since I take it there seems to be consensus of support for this, I'd like to move the recommendation before us on page 6, is that the Arts and Culture Strategy and Action Plan be adopted. Can I, if I second it, can I see it? If I propose it, can I see a seconder? We're subject to the tweaks on strengths and weaknesses, yeah? That's Debbie's just reminded me.
Got a clear note on that.
Yeah, do people want those read out? I think they were the points raised. I think we all know roughly what was said. Okay, so can I see a seconder? Okay, thank you. Okay, so those in favour, please show. Excellent, thank you. That's unanimous. We're continuing our track record. So that now takes us on to the final item, which is the amendment to festivals and events policy. And as soon as we've had the introduction from Laura, I will go straight to Martin.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to recommend an amendment to the festival and events policy relating to the noise levels and frequency of events, but also to provide an overview of events in our parks in 2019. Maidstone is now recognised as a key destination for large events and festivals, comparing favourably with other major towns and cities around the UK. And in 2019, Moat Park was booked virtually every weekend during the event season. The 3 largest events in Moat Park have calculated to have brought in over £3 million to the local economy, as well as direct spend into accommodation, restaurants, shops by attendees. It is the spend by the event organisers using local contractors for supplies, toilets, water, employing local bar security companies that actually drive a lot of the economic benefit. Although events can take place all year round, it is actually only possible to hold events in our parks for a very limited 5-month period. Nearly all events take place over the weekend. Certain school holiday periods are kept as clear as possible. Large events can take up to 2 weeks to construct the event site and up to 5 days to dismantle, so this limits the actual potential event days available. It's also important to try and provide a rest for the park where possible after large events for the ground to recover. Realistically, there are only around 18 to 20 event weekends available. Regarding some of the events, proms, it was great news that proms in the park was able to go ahead this year after the hard decision of the committee last year. Through the sponsorship of Western Homes and that the leader of the council was able to secure, proms was able to go ahead and will go ahead again in 2020. As of today, the event date has just been confirmed as the 6th of June 2020 rather than the May Bank holiday weekend, and this is to accommodate the sponsors and also to avoid clashing with an event in Moat Park. The small amount of funding that the council had left from proms was put to good use with a series of bandstand concerts in Brenchley Gardens. Maidstone Area Arts Partnership agreed on the programme and managed the 4 concerts, which was very well received. This year, the event company who had been commissioned to run the Multicultural Food and Music Festival in Moat Park sadly announced that they could no longer subsidy the event in relation to the funding cuts each year. It has proved impossible to make this event self-funding. Rising costs meant it was unable to be funded by income from the stalls, and in 2018, one day was a complete washout through stormy weather, so traders have had to be offered lower rates to take part in the future. The Community Mela was held again in Watman Park. There is a date in the Moat Park Diary being held for the Community Mela for 2020. However, at the moment, this has not been confirmed whether it will move. The additional cost of holding an event in a much larger space is still being considered by the Mela Committee. Rambling Man Fair is still the largest event in Maidstone's calendar. It attracts visitors from around the world and from throughout the UK, staying in accommodation with friends and families, glamping. 2019 was a very good year for Rambling Man, and the festival organiser has said that 2020 will be one of their strongest lineups yet. There were many other events that took place, attracting a wide range of ages, both residents and visitors. These included Rock the Moat and Revival. There was also a beer festival, Prosecco and Gin Festival in Moat Park. Watman Park also had an open-air cinema that is set to return in 2020. However, most of the events that take place in Moat Park are actually charity runs and walks, and these events are growing both in numbers and in size. In addition to the 2 main parks, Jubilee Square hosted around 20 events and activities in addition to the farmers' markets. The amendment that is proposed to the events and festival policies reflects the differentiation in music noise through the 3 categories of event. Category A having the most impact and the higher noise level to C where there is little or no noise at all. The amendment to the policy would allow more flexibility with events. Many of the charity runs should now be classed as category events through the size and impact on the park and through the major impact on the roads and need for traffic management. Currently, the policy allows for 2 category events of up to 6 days in total. 3 of those days are currently being used by Rambling Man. The proposal to increase to 8 category events of up to 12 days in totals, which is actually a maximum of 8 days for music events. And due to the limitations of the availability of the park, it is unlikely that all those dates would be used, as we already have 18 events provisionally booked for 2020. But it would allow some flexibility if something good comes our way and we have to react fast to secure it. It is also proposed that Watman Park is restricted to Category B events. Therefore, it is proposed that the Festival and Events Policy is amended, as says. It still provides limitations, but it allows natural growth. Thank you.
Martin.
Thank you very much for this report. I'm glad to see how we're breaking down these events. I've actually had a couple of residents, well, one in particular has rung me and asked me, could I not hear it? Well, I had to say, no, I'm afraid I can't. Well, I don't understand. I know where you live. Why can't you hear it? Well, I'm afraid I was in Bath. And I really couldn't hear it, but if he'd like to ring the appropriate number, which I furnished him with, and I believe he's made the appropriate recommendations by letter. But I do think where we're setting out something, it's a lot, and this should be on our website, then I think people will have a bit more understanding. I think also people must be aware, and I didn't really see, that it's an obvious thing to state, but the wind has an awful factor in this. You can be, and I've experienced this quite about 25, 30 years ago with a certain event that happened in Moat Park, and you could hear someone's voice at the far end of Bearsted or the other end of Allington. It just depends where the wind is coming from. So I think we need to always listen, as we do, to people making complaints about the noise, but I think by putting this in place, it will help a lot to the environmental guys and gals that have to go out and take the decibel readings and then deal with the members of the public. So that's good. Watman Park, 6.2 on page 71, it says here, and I just want someone to say, it is absolutely marvellous, thank you, Councillor Cox, it is working. It says it has a substantial electricity supply and is designed to host medium-sized events. Is the electricity absolutely, definitely working? That's marvellous.
We have it tested before proms and before any events in there each time, just to make sure it is working. And so far, so good.
Anybody else? Any points? Yeah, Annabelle and then Faye.
This probably won't come across right, but take it in the spirit it's intended. When somebody books one of the public spaces for an event, and obviously they have to sign whatever the document is, are they encouraged to buy some kind of cancellation or event insurance in case there is a washout, for example, or there's another problem associated with weather or an incident? Because I know in the past we've had 1 or 2 issues, and it was funny when Councillor Cox said something about the electricity. I thought, oh yes, I remember that a few years ago. So do we encourage them to do that to make sure that they are protected?
We can't insist that they have their own insurance, but most event promoters have event insurance as a matter of course. A good example of that recently was for the fireworks events that were taking place. Leeds Castle had to cancel the Saturday. They managed to run the Sunday event. Now, they had extensive event insurance that covered them not only for the cost of the event and the reply, but also the lost income and profit from that. However, some of the other ones will have insurance, but it might not cover them to the same level. Kent Life, for example, decided to then run the cancelled Saturday the following week to recover some losses, so that make sure that they could actually still. So it is up to the event organiser to decide what level of insurance they will put in place, but most will do in case of unexpected events.
I mean, the only reason I mention it is because in the past we have had 1 or 2 headaches when someone said, but actually you should pay us for X, Y, Z, and it's not our, as Maidstone Borough Council's fault. So therefore, I just want to make sure that we then don't have that additional admin headache following an event.
Yeah, I think that's noted then.
I'm saying no. It's the good thing about the insurance bit is it's on the head of the event promoter when they book the event. They must put it in place. Yes.
Okay, Faye. Faye, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask, on page 53, looking at the cross-cutting issues, have the local ward councillors, I think they're the High Street ones, I'm not sure, have their views been sought on this request to amend the policy?
Not directly, just through the actual report. They do, for every event that we've had, I know they've been very active with the local community and actually canvassing residents as to what they require. So they've been very aware of it in the past, but possibly not directly at this point. I'm not sure if they were aware of this report. I say last time this went to the Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee. It wasn't actually going to ward councillors then, but they did come along as visiting members, I believe.
I think, sorry, knowing the ward councillors, I think they might be pretty upset. I want to support this. I think this is a common sense approach, and it's absolutely right. But I think this is a general comment about the relationship between officers and members. If you let us know what's going on, we're far more likely to support you. And I've got visions of 1 or 2 councillors thinking, over my dead body, you can't do this, which is a bit of a pity because I support it. And I think you're absolutely right to bring it to us. So may I respectfully suggest that somebody somewhere, it's a bit late now, isn't it? Well, let's hope I'm proven wrong. If I may move on to the question about the financial cross-cutting issue. You're saying that this income is within amounts already accounted for. Does that mean that we've set our income figure a bit too high? I was a bit puzzled by that. So if you come back to me on that, please.
The income targets for event income for all our parks and open spaces is high. It is challenging, and we do have to use not just event income, but also commercial income through advertising on poster sites and everything to achieve our total. So we have got challenging targets to reach. This will help us achieve, so hopefully make it slightly easier to achieve. But it is a target, and it's difficult to meet, but we try and balance it each year.
And finally, whereupon the arts and culture policy that we had a look at previously, that really bowled me over. Unfortunately, when I got to Appendix 1, the festival and events policy, I thought, flipping heck, this is out of date. It really is very out of date. I can fully understand why you need to amend it, and it's got to be done now. Chairman, I think you were going to... I did nobble you about it, didn't I? And do please encourage us all, because my hair fell out when I read some of this stuff in this policy. We've got to do something with it.
I think what I was going to say was, and I'll come to Annabelle in a second, but since you just prompted me, I was going to suggest an amendment, in addition to the recommendation there, that we also have a second recommendation, is that once the work in the sense of place has been carried out, which is referenced in the arts and cultural policy, that we actually then do a refresh of our festivals and events policy, destination management plan, because it just would make sense that once we have that sense of place, that we review how these other strategies all work to encourage it. Plus, obviously, you know, clearly the festivals and events and destination management plan are looking more externally focused, and arts and culture to some extent is more internally focused. But I think it would pick up the point I know you were saying, Faye, is that you know, so that we'd agree the recommendation as there tonight. Then we agree that when we've done the sense of place, that that's the obvious time to actually, you know, just look again at the policies and make sure that they all, you know, cross-reference, or, you know, and so on, which I'm sure we do periodically anyway. Laura.
Just an idea. Obviously, the policy was done several years ago with a small revision back then. This is really just a brief amendment, and I think a revision to the policy overall to update it is required. However, I think it needs two separate things. We need a festival and events policy relating to the use of our parks and open spaces for events, and an event strategy which would sit more comfortably with the arts and culture strategy is a slightly separate, different thing. So, you know, if the policy becomes an actual policy for the use of our parks and open spaces as opposed to a festival and event strategy, which really falls under the arts and culture strategy.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Annabelle.
I was actually going to suggest that we redid this now, because bearing in mind, it looks really tired, doesn't it? It looks like something out of the Dark Ages, almost as if you're still using a push-button phone instead of a smartphone. I do remember when it was first written, and I think we're all a little bit, oh, I'm not sure about this. Is it going to work? And clearly it's absolutely taken off. My only question is, the way it is written at the moment, does that give you the support that you need for the type of events that you're trying to attract into the borough? And if it had a bit of a revamp now, would that make, I don't know, your life a little bit easier when it comes down to sponsorship or putting it on boards or whatever it may be? Because you have mentioned that the targets are particularly challenging. So does it do what it says on the tin, or is it just a sort of sticking plaster for now, even though you've got a broken leg and you'll still hop along and not cry too much? So maybe that's an odd way to look at it, but it's, if it really does need doing now, then maybe we should just get on and do it. Sorry, and I'd like to make that recommendation, if I may.
Right, okay. Is that seconded yet? Well, yeah, I mean, I was looking at it slightly differently in terms of the timescale, wasn't I? Because I was suggesting that we did sense of place first and then updated these others. I don't know if the...
There are a number of sort of pressing issues, obviously, to regard 2020. So having the amendment now would be very helpful, so that we can actually confirm, because things are moving on, and then take the next step.
I'm happy to second this, Mr. Chairman. We've just been told that this would enable us to possibly, potentially gain more income, but still listening and having what we have, the A, B, C categories. So I think with that in place, we should enable the department to carry on.
Sorry, I got myself confused there, yeah. Now, yes, so the recommendation here, number one, which is what we just, is what we all agree that we do, yeah? Then the next thing, obviously, will be the sense of place, and then that work, which I think Laura agreed in terms of festival and events would be looking at an events policy, strategy, wasn't it? Is what you were suggesting we look at in light of the sense of place, yeah. So that would be, I suppose, the second recommendation. So the recommendation one is as written there, so we update it immediately to give the scope. Recommendation two is that following work on the sense of place, let's say updated events policy be presented. Because they're slightly... Well, no, we're updating the thing for this immediate thing we're being asked in terms of that table on page. Well, so what I'm suggesting is that we do what we've been asked. Now, there's two different things, Martin. We've been asked to immediately update so table 59 gets inserted, right? So what the officers are asking for is that we go with that table on page 59. Right. So that's, I think that, and so what I'm saying, yeah, so what I'm suggesting is that in addition to that, so we do that, in addition to that is once we've done the sense of place work, it would be logical.
I thought you were implying that you could use the word alongside, because one's external work, isn't it? The sense of place thing is being done externally. Therefore, it's
the sense of place work will be led by Anne-Marie, because it's clearly it's in the action plan we've just agreed on page 42 or 43. So that is starting, I know already. Anne-Marie's already starting to look at having discussions with potential people who can assist on that work, and we're not yet knowing how long that whole exercise will take, whether it's a sort of.
I don't want to trample on process and whether it would be wrong. I just want whether or not it can be done or can't be done, and if it can be done, would it be advantageous to do it?
I'm sorry, I've missed it. Could you explain once again what you're asking us to do for you?
Absolute pleasure. I understand the recommendation that is being made here, but as I said before, I think this whole policy is out of date, hence my reference to the push-button phone and the smartphone. I think it's just... It was at a time when I think we were dipping our toe into the water, and now we've moved on. So I think in order for us to take... oh gosh, how can I put this? In order us to maximise our potential for next year and to assist Mrs Dixon with what she's trying to do, bearing in mind she said she has some really ambitious targets associated with this, if it helps to rewrite the policy such that it gives you the backing, so when you're looking for, I don't know, new events or maybe new people to come into the town to do something different, you've got the policy behind you, you have the support mechanism. If that helps, then that was my proposal for now, and I thought that's what we were looking at. This has nothing to do with a sense of place at all. The fact that a sense of place may be going on is there. Surely the two things can run in conjunction with each other, but it's not a we do that and then we do this, because I think this has real income potential and something that if the opportunity is there, I think we should harness its full potential.
Okay, I can see what you're saying now, yeah.
Sorry, can I just... Sorry, just in terms of the areas that you think are out of date, for me, because I'm being very slow this evening, would you mind pointing them out?
Okay, Appendix 1, Festival and Events Policy. I know this was revised in November 2016. I can't remember when it was first written. My recollection is it was first written when we had the first inquiry about Rambling Man. And I think Rambling Man first took place in, I think it was the summer of 2015, if I remember correctly, but I could be completely wrong. So I think we started this, I don't know, 6 months before or something like that, maybe a little bit longer. So this really is a dinosaur, because it was at a time when I think we did do proms in the park, but we didn't do big events. We had Madonna here many years ago as part of the Radio 1 big event. And I know Leeds Castle do events, but this was something actually on our property, you know, our assets. So that's what I think needs updating. You asked, Mr. Foster. I think it needs updating. Frankly, it's not ambitious enough.
If you're looking to me to add anything, I would just simply turn to Laura and say, and what would enable you for this policy to be better for you to gain more income?
Initially, it would be to accept the amendments that we can put into this. Then we would update it with more current information so that it actually is a document that is valid today, which can be done.
Okay, so
What I was suggesting is, as I say, we have the amendment, so the actual policy details are the same. What gets updated is all the factual information that goes around the policy with the more up-to-date figures, dates and events, so that it actually is a true document, which can be done fairly easily. It can be done straightforward as a working.
To producers or events organisers, excellent. Okay, so that's good. That's one that. So that's. Do we need that as a? I mean, you're just going to do that. We don't need to have a recommendation on that bit, do we? Okay. So. Oh, okay.
Excuse me, that was my recommendation too, which I thought that Councillor Cox had seconded. But don't we have to actually then vote on it so it becomes a substantive for recommendation 2 as a formal process?
Okay, so Debbie, if you, what we need to, I think we just need to make sure that the word, Debbie's got a sense of wording, so that we're clear on what we're trying to do in terms of that.
So, just to clarify, the first recommendation is agreed, that the amendments to the policy set out in the report be agreed, and that there's a second recommendation that's been added in, is that that policy itself needs to be updated, and that that will include more current information, factual information, so it's a true statement of the current situation, and that will be the second recommendation.
To proactively promote something, because that's what you're talking about.
Can I just make a caveat? Can I just make the caveat that it would appear possibly that such things may get updated as acts or legal sides. So therefore, couldn't we say, with the ability for delegated powers to return to this committee when needed to update the policy if there are restrictions that are being put in place external to us that need to be clarified, not to leave a document languishing for 3 years that can't be updated. I'm just saying delegate the powers to update as needed if things change, such as policies like health and safety. There may be something in health and safety that needs changing. It's in the policy, so someone will go, well, we can't because your health and safety policy doesn't allow it.
But this is why I suggested this needs to be updated now and not wait for the sense of place, because I agree with you. I think there are aspects of legislation that have overtaken this, and maybe even, dare I say, the type of events that we were pursuing. There's probably all sorts of other things out there that we cannot become involved with because it's not part of our events policy, and it's almost as if we can't host them or enable it because there's a little bit of red tape that says, so sorry, can't do that. So yes, I think whether we can do that via a delegated system or whether it can come back with a couple of amendments, I'm happy either way, as long as we don't have a series of missed opportunities and find that something else goes to one of the other boroughs that are very close to us.
Would you be happy if, rather than having to bring it back to a formal committee, is that we agree that the update is done and it's done in conjunction by approved by the head of economic regeneration in conjunction with the chair and the vice chair of the committee, so that otherwise we'd have to have a report coming back to us in January, which is our next meeting, whereas the other way could be approved in a few days once Laura sort of updated it.
That's absolutely fine, Chairman. Happy to agree to that. But I think as a matter of courtesy, I think it should be circulated to all the members of the committee who are here tonight for interest. And if there are any other comments that anyone wants to make, then maybe that could be adjusted once we've seen them. But yeah, more than happy.
I'm going to ask what might be a stupid question. This is from my little brain tonight. So in addition to this policy here, obviously is about how we go about it. It's the mechanics of it, and that's how we can talk to presenters and producers. Do we have a separate sort of events strategy at all at the moment?
There probably needs to develop as part of the destination management plan. It is quite a focus on events as a major driver of growth for the borough. So probably incorporated into that. And as you say, the mechanics is the policy about what we actually do.
Okay, so that second thing you said, that's what would follow from sense of place, because that whole lot, the DMP would need an element of refreshing. So, yeah, but for tonight, we're just concentrating on this policy. Going to agree the recommendation and the amendment, and then that's it for tonight, isn't it, on this?
Sorry, Chairman, I'm just indulged me a bit. I've got a funny feeling that this is a subsidiary of the economic development strategy. I'm sure this sat as one of the suite of policies under the economic development strategy, didn't it? Going back to 2015, or have I just completely pulled that out of the wrong filing cabinet?
I'm not sure of a subsidiary. It certainly sits alongside the economic development strategy. But if members recall, you did ask us to consider in the review of the economic development strategy, which we're in the process of commissioning, the festivals and events policy, the DMP, as all part of a suite of documents that support the local economy.
Okay, so can we go back to, so we've got the recommendation, we've got the amendment. So first of all, can I see everyone in favour of the amendment, which I think we all know what it is. Come on, Annabelle, what's your amendment?
This is an amendment.
Right, okay, that's unanimous. So then can I see everybody in favour of now the amended resolution, please? Excellent. Thanks very much after that bit of confusion. So at that point, I think that's it, isn't it? I declare the meeting closed and look forward to seeing you all for our briefing session in December.